In 1985, Six Flags Great America debuted Z-Force, the world's first Intamin space diver. This ride was praised upon when it first opened, but after it moved to Six Flags Magic Mountain, this coaster was hated for its terrible rough ride. And in 2003, the coaster would shut down forever. So what happened to cause this coaster to be hated and shut down? This is the story of Flashback. This troubled coaster began in the 80s with Swiss manufacturer Intamin. We know Intamin now for their supersized mega coasters and high-intensity LSM coasters, but they were a much different company back then. Founded in 1967 under the name International Amusement Installations, Intamin's job then was to install rides for other companies. See, Intamin would contact other manufacturers to actually build the ride, while Intamin handled the sale and installation of the ride. The most famous of these companies to be involved with Intamin was Juvenola. Founded in 1888 as a metal forging shop, Jovenola's main aspect was a wide variety of steel products. These included highways, electrical grids, and even submarines like that Ocean Gate one that collapsed on itself. Around the 1980s, Jovenola and Intamin began a partnership. These two companies would collaborate to create unique roller coasters. The first is a racing coaster, Vertigo Rama in Argentina in 1983. Well, technically, Intamin's first coaster was a kids ride Junior Gemini at Cedar Point, and the coaster that got them notoriety was American Eagle at Six Flags Great America, then known as Marriott's Great America in 1981. This coaster was a crowd pleaser for its wooden bite and racing feature. This would be the backbone of what got Jovenola to go to Intamin. Anyway, back to Vertigo Rama. While this coaster looked impressive, it had a lot of problems. In fact, this ride never even opened or ran to the public. But this coaster wouldn't deter them from continuing to work with each other. The next year, 1981, Intamin introduced the bobsled coasters, a type of coaster that uses bobsleds to traverse the coaster, so the trains aren't connected to the track. They introduced 3 bobsled coasters for 1984. For the sake of this video, 2 of them went to Six Flags Parks, Great Adventure, and Magic Mountain. Six Flags were clearly impressed enough to go back to Intamin for a brand new prototype. In 1985, Six Flags Great America opened Z-Force, the prototype Intamin Space Diver. The Space Diver is a compact coaster model whose elements consist of sharp, hairpin drops. This model promises big thrills in a small footprint, something that appeals to parks with limited land and/or money. What makes this ride very important is because of the 2 people at Jovenola who designed the track. While Warner Stengel was the one to design the layout of the Space Diver, it was the first coaster designed by Walter Bolligard and Claude Mabillard. These were 2 Jovenola employees who worked on a few coasters with them before forming their own company. That company would be Bolligard and Mabillard, aka B&M, who has made some of the world's famous thrill coasters. The Space Diver was the first coaster to use B&M's special track design with a box-shaped spine. This track would later become one of the most famous track designs in the amusement industry. Needless to say that this track has had humble histories on this small coaster. Another new first was that the Space Diver was the first to have 4 riders sit across instead of the usual 2 riders per row. This allows the trains to be smaller and therefore able to traverse tighter elements while still keeping a higher capacity. Intamin wished to mass produce the Space Diver to a wider number of locations all around the globe. Yeah, too bad that worked as well as me trying to get accepted into Harvard, because they only sold 1 f***ing installation. That installation would go to Six Flags. The model caught the attention of Six Flags to buy. In 1984, Six Flags would acquire Marriott's Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. They hoped to expand Great America with their ambitious plans. One of their first in their plans was for a new flashy prototype. So in 1985, Six Flags Great America would open Z-Force.
The Force is here. The ultimate force. The world's first and only Z-Coaster. Designed to turn and twist and dive like no other force on Earth. Come ride the Z-Force only at Six Flags Great America.
Built with 130 tons of steel with 67 foundations requiring 900 cubic yards of concrete and 500 man-hours, Z-Force would open on July 10th, 1985 to universal acclaim. The coaster's layout would consist of the following. After climbing the 86-foot tall lift, the train takes a tight left and a huge section of straight track. So right off the bat, we already have pretty poor pacing. After this is the first of a few hairpin drops, as the train twists in the opposite direction. These drops were so tight, many people thought they were dive loops. In contrary, Z-Force never goes upside down. After the first one, riders would head upwards before doing a little S-curve into another hairpin drop. Head into a mid-course to maximize capacity and repeat the process a few more times. After doing the same element 5 times, the ride would finish out with a helix before entering the final brake run. The ride is designed to feel like you're flying a fighter jet as if Tom Cruise was the one controlling it, with its rolling dive drops resembling flight maneuvers. Upon its initial debut, the coaster was praised upon opening. Coaster nerds were thrilled by the tight footprint and intimidating drops of Z-Force. It was truly a one-of-a-kind roller coaster, but despite this coaster's popularity, the coaster wouldn't last long at Great America. Even though the coaster had high ridership, Z-Force closed 2 years later in 1987 and was swiftly removed. Now when a coaster is removed 2 years after it opened, it's usually a big red flag that's either terrible or extremely unreliable. Look at Harley Quinn Crazy Coaster for example. That coaster was open for only a year and pretty much everyone considered it a major failure. However, this doesn't apply to Z-Force. What happened was that Six Flags had Z-Force on its ride relocation program. This was a program Six Flags had in the 80s where they take a ride, have it operate at one of their parks for a couple years, relocate it to another parks, and repeat the process. They did it to save money on rides while giving something to one of their parks. You constantly have to add new rides to your parks in order to keep guests coming back. But at the same time, new rides are stupidly expensive, and buying something used is much cheaper. Those bobsled coasters we mentioned earlier were part of that program. Great Adventure moved theirs to both Great America and Great Escape, while Magic Mountain moved theirs to Over Texas. Z-Force had an estimated cost of $4 million. So for these reasons, Six Flags relocated Z-Force down south. The land that Z-Force sat on would be replaced with a few rides, but today sits in RMC top-of-track wooden coaster Goliath. Z-Force would head down south to Six Flags Over Georgia. Despite having already operated up north, Z-Force received a lot of media attention. Since the internet was very much in its infancy in the late 80s, many people have never seen a coaster quite like this. So naturally, enthusiasts in the area were excited for the new ride. The ride opened in its new home in 1988. But just like before, the coaster would only last a few years until 1991. After its run in Georgia, Z-Force would head far west to California, this time to Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. So in 1992, Six Flags opened the coaster under a new name, Flashback. This name change was likely due to Magic Mountain already having a looping starship called Z-Force. Unfortunately, it would be at this location when the coaster would change for the worse. When Flashback opened at Six Flags Magic Mountain, the ride got a lot of media attention. Like I said before, the internet was very much in its infancy in the early 90s, so most people didn't know that Flashback previously ran at 2 different parks. So guests were hyped as they've never seen something like this. Unfortunately, that excitement quickly turned into pain. Almost immediately, Flashback grew a reputation for being one of the worst roller coasters on Earth. The problem comes from its rough track and over-the-shoulder restraints. Now it's about time I address the elephant in the room. The cause of the roughness is the fact it was relocated twice. Now as much as I'd like for rides to be relocated when the time is up, there is an inherent problem with that. When building a new coaster, engineers build it using precise build and brand new materials. However, the process for relocating a ride is by disassembling it, bolt by bolt, piece by piece, to then be carted to a new location carefully. The issue is that something usually gets lost in pieces while moving it. And when you're dealing with old torn up metal, there's bound to be some errors during the process. Here, the problem comes from misalignment with the track, causing it to be rough. So when you're riding through the hairpin drops, the roughness causes the riders to bash into both the lap bars and over the shoulder restraints, damaging the kneecaps and the head. Since it was rebuilt twice, the coaster's condition was far worse than it was in Illinois, and no matter how you braced for it, the violent drops would just slam your head into oblivion. This makes Flashback an unrideable coaster that no one ever wanted to do again. Then again, many people weren't even able to ride it. This is because Flashback was closed between the months of May and September. This is due to the water park being located right next to Flashback. This is a major problem, as the high noise levels would disturb the guests and distract the lifeguards. The B&M track, especially the early ones, are pretty damn loud. Just look at Kumba for example. That's pretty damn loud. With each passing year, Flashback's ride quality would decrease faster than alcohol at a Mexican party. So with Flashback constantly closed and having a bad reputation for being painful, many wondered why something like this still existed at the park. After sporadically operating for 11 years, Flashback would suddenly close in 2003. The coaster then entered its abandoned status for 4 years. It's unknown why Flashback sat this way, but there were plans for Flashback to be moved to another area of the park, but nothing came of it. Finally in 2007, Flashback would be sold for scrap metal. This coaster's demise was a brutal one, as this coaster went from gold to dog. Flashback would be replaced with a set of water park cabanas. Intamin hoped to mass produce the space diver to show up all around the globe. But today, Flashback is seen as one of the biggest failures in the amusement industry. And the funny thing is that this wouldn't even be the last disaster Magic Mountain would get from Intamin. But Defunctland already made a video about the disastrous Green Lantern, so check out his video in the card or description. So what has Intamin been up to as of late? While Intamin has had a lot of reliability issues, they still continue to make world-class rides today, such as Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. And while Joe Vanola unfortunately went defunct, the two designers would go on to create one of the most influential coaster manufacturers of all time. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This video is part of a series where we dive into roller coasters and other amusement rides history and dynamics. If you enjoyed this video, which if you watched to the end it means you did, you can help out by giving a like. Also, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. It only takes 5 seconds to do, and that motivates me to make more awesome content just like this in the future. We will be making the video about the Rise of B&M, so you don't want to miss that. This is the Coaster Flood, riding out.